At that, I'll open up to questions.
When did the Seminoles get their guns?
Seminoles, they believe that most of them, well, they had traded. In terms of the treaty, they were given muskets, which is what everybody's carrying around here, shot and powder. But they also believe they got them from Cuba and trade in the South. They were, there's no, to my knowledge, authentic Seminole rifle from the periods available. I have an 1819 flintlock musket. It still fires. That could have been used on the site.
They didn't use bow and arrows or knives
no.
or anything. They just picked them off as rifles.
No, this was a musket war. This was the last. Well, they used muskets right up into the Civil War, but the weaponry used here was primarily muskets. I mean, even Winfield Scott, who commanded the army, believed in muskets more than rifles because you could throw acorns, anything in there, fire with a musket.
Why were they reinforcing Fort King?
Fort King.
Fort King from Fort Brooks.
Fort King was the largest military encampment. It was located in what is now Ocala. The site's now a National Historic Landmark. The fort's going to be reconstructed at sometime in the future. But the fort was built in 1827. The Indians in 1823 signed a treaty with the government to relocate to this area. Fort King was constructed at its north end as part of an Indian agency, a combination. In terms of the treaty, was the government was to supply the Indians with blankets, food, those kind of things. So the fort was garrisoned in that time period. It was the scene just leading up to after the last treaty at Payne's Landing, where Osceola became known, supposedly stabbing the knife through the paper. That happened at Fort King. What happened here, this links to Fort King, is that the reason the ambush happened here is that Osceola was seeing the business up at Fort King that morning, assassinating, killing the agent, Wiley Thompson, who had affronted him earlier, and that was a declaration of war. Osceola was supposed to be here. He couldn't, but Jumper and Alligator knew that if the column moved any further to the northwest, it would pull away from a rally point. Now that's another part of the ambush tactics. Anytime you plan an ambush, in case it goes bad, you have a rally point. The rally point for the Seminoles was the Wahoo Swamp, over here about 10 miles. In case they didn't prevail, and reinforcements came in, they would all, by different routes, rally back to the rendezvous point in the swamp. But as the army column moved further and further this way, they could be picked off through the open pine woods. Back to the ambush itself. By the time Dade reached this point, it was drizzling rain. Now he had flankers out south of here. Flankers are men walking further out of the woods. He let them come in, put their arms under their overcoat, protect the powder. So here these guys are walking here with their weapons not ready to fire, but underneath their overcoats. He also, his point guards, they were just stripping on this little road. So there was nobody patrolling. I mean, the Indians were right where you stand. Hundreds of them, right where you sit. I mean, all they had to do was go out this far. If you'd have had dogs patrolling out here, the dogs would have murdered them. They picked up a cow south of here, but they failed to notice, and Clark conveys this in his memoirs, the woods between here and the last camping point were alive with birds singing. All of a sudden they come up here, everything's dead quiet. There were a number of little tips that you could get by today's standards that they ignored all of them. They grew overconfident. They believed that the Indians couldn't pull this off. That was part of the problem going in. Sorry, I rattled on to that question. Okay, any more questions? Yes, sir.
A lot of horses involved?
Not a lot of horses. Well, the Indians had some horses, but they didn't want them winding away, so they took it way back in the woods. The officers were on horses. There were some horses pulling I think it was oxen pulling that cannon, a 6-pound cannon, but most of these men were on foot and they followed behind their breastwork.
This breastwork, so there were pines around and they cut the pines?
Yeah, they cut these big pines down with hatchets.
Dragged them over.
Dragged them over here and made this.
And it would have look something like
Well, it would
this?
have looked exactly like that. This same length, same spot. The original, and there was basically 80 men behind us.
Doesn't offer a whole lot of protection, does it?
No, they were getting shot through the opening. Like I said, they should have charged. You figure you're dead. The best thing to do is take a few with you. Any other questions?